Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar covering scenario management in PTV Vissim 8. My name is Lucas Couch. I'm working in technical product management for PTV Vissim at the PTV Group headquarters in Karlsruhe, Germany. With me is my colleague Jochen Lohmiller, who will answer your questions in the chat or in the questions window, so feel free during the webinar to ask questions there. The webinar is scheduled for about 30 minutes to 40 minutes, and after that we will still be there to answer your questions, maybe show some additional things you would like to see. There are, three main topics in this webinar. After a short introduction and motivation for scenario management, we will cover the two different approaches how you can work with scenario management in Vissim, and then tell you about some additional functions which you can use. The motivation for scenario management is, well, quite obvious. If you have ever done a Vissim project, you know the situation. You have, say, your base case and a planning case, two different input files. And now if you want to do a change to both of them, say fix the position of a priority rule or something like that, you need to do that in both files, and it's, well, difficult to do that identically. So what we really would like is to be able to apply changes to multiple files at once. And that's exactly what you can do with scenario management. So the typical use cases are, well, obviously the no-build scenario versus the build scenario. That is something you have in most projects. So that can be geometry variants, so the junction layout, say an intersection or a roundabout. You can have different demand scenarios like AM peak, PM peak. You can have signalization variants, different control types, or, well, just different splits. And of course, any combination of these variants. And with scenario management in Vissim, you can modify any attributes of any object. So you can do all this. And the two approaches I was talking about are first the implicit mode. Basically, you edit scenarios and work in them as in different input files, but with the option to apply some changes you do in the network editor or in list windows to multiple scenarios at once. And the second approach is a more constructive way, not thinking mostly in scenarios, but thinking in modifications and edit those and then combine scenarios from multiple modifications. Let me show you first the implicit approach in a very simple network. So we have this very simple network, just one link here. You have, done some changes maybe to it, saved it under some name as a normal input file. And now, if you want to start scenario management, you have to start in the File menu, go to the sub-menu Scenario Management, and click Place under Scenario Management. There you can enter a project name and a name for this first scenario. Click OK. Now Vissim is doing some things behind the scenes. preparing for handling of multiple scenarios later, creating some subdirectories. We will come to that in a minute. And when that is done, you see some changes in the Vissim window. In the title bar, you don't see an INPX file name anymore, but it shows the project name and the currently selected scenario, which is number 1, and with the name one link. You can see that the frames of the sub-windows have changed from blue to green, another visual reminder that you are in scenario editing mode now. And here on the left side in the Project Explorer sidebar, you can see there is one scenario, the one you have just created. Now you can do other changes to this scenario. Say just add another corner here. And now if you go to the Save button or to the File menu, you see Save has now been replaced by Save Scenario, because if you save now or just click Ctrl S, this change is saved in scenario number 1. Now, if you want to start a second scenario, you can just use the network editor as you are used to. For example, create a second link. And now, in order to save that as a new scenario, you go to the File menu, the sub-menu, here, and then select Save Scenario As. And now you can specify the name for that second scenario, say 2 links. Okay, and now you see here in the Project Explorer, you have 2 scenarios. Just through a double click on one of those, you can load that scenario to continue editing in this one. So for example, now while you have loaded the second scenario, if you want to do some changes here, you can do that. Just save. They are now saved to the second scenario. And well, say you want to do some change to the first scenario, again, only there, say you change the display type of the link. Now it's dark gray here. Save that again. If you now go back to the other scenario, this change is not visible here. But now, say, and that's the interesting part, you want to do something, a change which applies to both scenarios. For example, say you want to add some more spline points here. And now you want to have this change in scenario 1 and 2. In order to do this, you go to the File menu, Scenario Management, and select Save in Multiple Scenarios. You get this selection dialog to select the desired scenarios. Remember, you can have more than 2. So you select the ones you want and click Save. And now we are still in scenario 2. So if we just save something, this will only be saved to scenario 2. But if we now load scenario 1, you can see that this round curve here has been applied to scenario 1 as well. So this is the basic way scenario management, or the simple approach, the implicit approach works. And I will now load a slightly bigger example, which is available in the example files under training as well. And that's the intersection layout example. This one has already, oh, interesting. This one has already 3 scenarios with different intersection types. So the first scenario here is an unsignalized intersection, yield controlled. The second scenario has the same intersection but signalized. And the third scenario has a roundabout instead. Here at the right side, you can see in a chart window that there are results individually per scenario already run. And now say we want to add to these scenarios similar scenarios, or basically the same junction layouts, but for the PM peak. Let's assume this demand here in these scenarios is the AM peak. Now, how can we do this? We go to the Project Explorer window, right click, and in the context on a scenario, and in the context menu, there is an item duplicate. So if I do this, I get another scenario called with the same name, currently unsignalized intersection. And I will duplicate this one as well. I think there's a button here as a second option to do that. And let's duplicate the roundabout too. And now, if we want to change the names of the scenarios, we need to go to the project structure dialog, which is either available through this button here at the top or through the context menu here. And here for the scenarios, we can now change the names to PM. Okay, you see this immediately in the Project Explorer as well. And now what we want to do is to apply changes to the volumes and say routing. So I open the vehicle inputs list. I open scenario number 4, the unsignalized intersection. And well, so the AM peak was 800 vehicles from this side and 500 from the other ones. And if we look at the routing, we can see, let's just switch to 2D mode. So, and zoom out a bit. Okay, so in the volumes, from the left side here, from west, you have 800 vehicles, 500 each from the other two directions. And for the routing from the west, you have half of that going to the east, no, 2/3, sorry, and 1/3 going to north. So if we want to, well, in a way, turn that around, we will just for the PM peak change the volume from west to 500 and from east to 800. And for the routing decisions, now say it's 50-50 from west, and from east it's 2/3 going to west. So that's basically inverting the things. Not exactly, but in a way. Okay, and now all these changes in route attributes, in vehicle input attributes, you want to save them to these 3 scenarios, the PM scenarios. So you can go again to the file menu, save to multiple scenarios, or there's another option. You can, with control click, multi-select in the Project Explorer sidebar, and then click this button here, save and highlight the scenarios. So these changes are now applied to all these scenarios. So if you open, say, the signalized intersection, you have the same change here, that now the routes from east are changed, and well, the volume is 800 from east. So well, and now if you, for example, want to apply some change to the roundabout geometry, you load the roundabout, one of the roundabout scenarios, apply the change, and then save it to the 2 roundabout examples, to the 2 roundabout scenarios. With this number of scenarios, that is, well, still quite easy, and so if you want to do changes to demand, you will do them to scenario 1 to 3 or 4 to 6, AM or PM. If you want to do changes to the junction layout, you select the 2 scenarios with their respective layout. Now imagine you have another intersection there, and maybe different signalizations, which, by the way, need to be saved in different data files. So in different supply files for the signal controller, because the signal control data is not saved inside the Vissim data model, but in separate files. You know that. Let's just have a look at the signalized intersection scenario. Now, if you open the signal controller list, you know that there are the supply files, and this signal control.sig file, that's the specific file containing the green times, the timetable for this controller. So if you want to change this for another scenario, you have to save it in a different supply file name. So, and now if you have this, another intersection, then you can imagine you get a, well, bigger number of scenarios. Say then you have, if you have 3 different signal programs you want to work with, you would have already 18 combinations there, and then it can get a bit messy to select all the right scenarios each time you want to save something. And if that's the case, you will probably use the constructive approach instead of thinking only in scenarios. So just a summary again of the implicit approach. You start with placing the network under scenario management. You see that in the Vissim user interface, and then you can, well, save that scenario, save new changes to a different scenario, open scenarios, and save, that's most important, changes since the last save in multiple scenarios. Basically thinking of a scenario as a normal input file, but with the option to save changes to multiple files. Now, what happens internally? Let's just open the data directory here, the working directory. Okay, so you see in this directory, you have still one INPX file. This is the base network, and that's in the state of the network when you placed it under scenario management. And there is an additional file, the scenario database or the project database with the extension Vissim PDB. And there is, well, as you are used to it, the layout file for that network. So there's only one layout file for all the scenarios. You can, of course, create differently named layout files if you want to. And then there are some subdirectories, and especially interesting are modifications and scenarios. The other ones are used internally. And in the modifications, there are model transfer files which contain the changes applied to scenarios. And you can see this in the Project Explorer as well. So, for example, the first scenario has the modifications number 1 and 3 applied to it, and the signalized intersection has no modification. So this is basically identical with the base network, and the roundabout has modifications 1 and 2 applied to it. Now, currently, there is no way to visualize or to get an overview of the changes inside a modification inside the Vissim GUI. This will be available eventually, maybe in a service pack of Vissim 9. But what you can do now is just open such a modification, such a model transfer file in Notepad, and then you can see in XML what has been changed there. And well, the modification from the signalized intersection to get to these other two is deleting the signal heads and then add the yield signs, basically. So this is what is in modification number 1. And then modification number 2 for the roundabout. Well, if we just have a look at that, this contains, of course, lots of changed link geometry. So there are new links added with lots of spline points in the roundabout link. And sorry, and for example, conflict areas which have been added. When you work with that implicit mode, Vissim tries to limit the number of modifications as much as possible. So as long as you repeatedly save changes only to one scenario or to the same combination of scenarios, these will be applied to the same modification for all of these scenarios. But as I said before, if you have many scenarios, this can be quite, well, you have then changes to multiple, and if you do multiple changes to, say, the demand, and then between you do some changes to the geometry, and then do changes to the demand again for another combination of scenarios, you have 2 different modifications which affect the demand. And in a really big project with many, many scenarios and many combinations of different variants, say, you might want to use the constructive approach instead. I will show that in a minute. Let's just have another look at the scenario subdirectory. Here you can see you have one subdirectory inside per scenario with just S and the scenario number in 6 digits. And inside there is the results directory. You might know that there are the SDF files for saved simulation runs with all the results attributes inside. So the results are always per scenario, but other data is not. So let's go to the constructive mode now. If you, as I said, if you have a really big project with many combinations of variants, you might prefer to think in modifications and then construct your scenarios by combining multiple modifications. How does that work? In the project structure dialog, here again, accessible through the Project Explorer window, you can create modifications. Here you can see now the modifications which have been created by Vissim automatically, and you can create modifications just by clicking the plus button. You can give them a name and more description here, and then most important, because you want to edit this modification, you can specify here which other modifications need to be loaded before this modification can be applied. So for example, if you want the roundabout, I think that was modification 3. Let's see, just check here. No, sorry, it's 2. So go back to the modification, say it depends on 2. So now if we, and maybe from the base scenario, we want to delete the signal heads as well. So we should make it dependent on 1 and 2. Okay. So now we can load this modification. You see it, we have created it in the project structure dialog. Now it's here in my modification. Now if you open this, the base network is loaded and then modifications and 1 and 2 are applied. And if you now do something to that modification, for example, creating a new intersection, and then save it, this will be saved only inside this modification, not applied to any scenario automatically. So as you can see now, the frames of the sub-windows are red because you are in modification editing mode. You cannot run a simulation here because you don't have a complete scenario. It's just that modification. And now for to keep it simple, we just add a link and save that in the modification. And now let's go to the working directory again. Check this, and you can see it has just this one added link here inside. And now what you can do in the project structure dialog is create scenarios. So and say in this one you want to use modifications 1, 2, and 5. So now you have another scenario, and if we open this, we are now in scenario mode again. We can run a simulation and we have, all the results of these scenarios here. So what you do in the constructive approach is you edit your base network as you are used to it. You can do this in implicit mode as well, because you can open the base network from the Project Explorer as well and do changes here, which are then applied, of course, to all scenarios and before any modifications are applied. So you need to be careful not to do something that breaks it. You would get error messages and possibly not be able to load scenarios after that. And after, well, completing your base network, you then create modifications, say a different set of demands or different signalization references or specific layout changes at one location in the network. Save all these. Then for the modifications, you can define dependencies. As I said, you can define exclusions in the project structure dialog. You can define that modification does not work together with a different one. Then there are some functions here which help you to determine this. So if you select multiple modifications here, you can check them for if they can be combined. So if you click there, okay, 1 and 2 works. Well, we have seen that. And now the other check here is if they are independent, and you see you get an error message here because Vissim tries to load one without the other and then the other without the one, and you get an error message here. So they are not independent because, well, there are some lanes not available. So this tells you, well, basically, and that is something Vissim doesn't insert automatically if you use the implicit mode. Basically, is modification 2 depends on modification 1. So you can enter this here to make sure you get error messages as soon as you create the scenarios with combinations which won't work. And well, then you create scenarios by combining the specific modifications you want to have in those. And if you use this approach, you open scenarios not for editing, never for editing. You edit only modifications because you have some semantic meaning to them. This is the change to PM demand, for example, or this is the change to roundabout. And if you then want to modify that change, then you have to open that modification and save that in the modification file. And well, this approach, as I said, is recommended if you have a project with many scenarios, especially if you have many different modifications where you want to combine a different selection of modifications to each of them. Maybe not every combination, every possible, but specific combinations and so on. Then this approach works better for you. Okay, let's come to some other things. If you want to run multiple scenarios, there is no automatic option in the Vissim user interface yet, but there are COM methods for loading a scenario, for saving a scenario, so you can do network changes in between or save scenario as. And of course, you can run the simulation when a scenario is loaded as usual through COM. And with that example file intersection layout, there is a Visual Basic script provided. Let's just have a look at that. Close the project structure dialog, and here there's one script in the scripts list, and if we edit this basically runs a number of scenarios, and you can enter the number here. So because we don't have any results for scenarios 4, 5, and 6 yet, we run them and say one simulation run each, save that file, and execute that script. Now you can see that Vissim loads the scenarios. Well, it's too fast to see all of it, but you see that something happens. And after these are done, now we can load the scenario, say number 4, and well, this one is not updated automatically. Let's see. Do we have that simulation run? I seem to have modified the wrong file. Where are we? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's not here. I missed to copy the script file. I just need to get it there. Where is it? Oh, it's not here either, so I need to let's see, it should be in the examples directory. Which is in C. Users, public documents, Vissim 8, examples training, scenario management. So, well, let's see. Basically, what did it do? Okay. So it's here and has been saved in shared data. Ah, I see. Okay. Okay, so it is there. Oh, why don't we have the results? Network objects. Well, I need to check that later, I think. With that script, it should be possible to run your simulation for multiple scenarios, and then you have the results even. Let's just try to run. We have scenario 4 now to run this. It's possibly that the evaluation was not. It's in there. Okay. And maybe run it for this one as well. Okay, there we have a result. Fine. And so if you now want to compare results between different simulation runs, currently you can do that only by importing simulation runs. So now we have that scenario number 1 loaded, and we can import the and you see the delay measurements results here for scenario number 1, and in scenario number 4 we have the results for the change demand. You can see how that changes the result. Now, if you want to combine them in one diagram, in Vissim 9, you will get the option to access attributes from other scenarios, so especially result attributes, most interesting, through a relation available as indirect attributes in the attribute selection. Currently, this is not available, but you can import a scenario. Now we are in scenario number 4, and we want to read additionally a simulation run from scenario 1. So we import this one. This is now imported as run number 2 here. And now if we change this and add all simulation runs and add the average vehicle delay from, now we need to say this one, add a specific simulation run. Now you can see the 2 results here. So this is, well, is shown as simulation run 1 and simulation run 2. Actually, it is scenario 4 and scenario 1. You can label this in the legend here manually. As I said, eventually in Vissim 9 you will get an option to access these without importing simulation runs from other scenarios. For network comparison, there will be eventually a tree view where you can see differences between scenarios, but probably not in Vissim 9.0 yet. Currently, you can only, well, check the modifications and look at the XML files, at the model transfer files. There's another thing you can do in the project structure dialog, which is exporting network files. So if you have a specific scenario and you want to use this as a normal INPX file without any things which are saved in subdirectories and so on, you can select it in the project structure dialog and then export that scenario. And well, you just enter an INPX file name, exported scenario number 4, for example, and save it. And well, if you now open this file, you can see you are in normal INPX file editing mode. You see the file name at the top. There's no project open, and well, it's just a INPX file independent of scenario management. In the recent files list, as you can see, you can go immediately to previously loaded scenarios. So if you click there, you load the project, and then, well, starting, you see it, maybe it's, well, first the base network is loaded, and then all modifications for the respective scenarios is applied, and you see that scenario and are in scenario editing mode again. And last but not least, what can you do if you have already multiple different INPX files and want to combine them for scenario management? Eventually, there will be 2 new menu items in the scenario management menu of Vissim. The first one being generate a model transfer file, so basically a modification file from 2 files. So the modification, containing all the changes to change one network into the other, and another menu item for applying a model transfer file to a currently loaded network or scenario. And if you have this, you can then create the model transfer file, which changes one of your INPX files into the other one. And then you can put that first network under scenario management, create a new scenario by duplicating the first one, and then apply that model transfer file you have created to that second scenario, and then you have your two INPX files basically as scenarios in scenario management. Currently, these methods are only available through COM, and these are, well, in Vissim, in the object Vissim, generate model transfer file, which is between the current file and a given file name, or generate model transfer file between files where you have to specify both file names. And then there is the method vissim.apply model transfer file to apply a given model transfer file to the currently loaded scenario or network. So this completes the webinar, all the things I wanted to show you. There are more webinars, past webinars available on our websites and on YouTube. You will be sent a link to replay this webinar automatically as soon as it is available on the website. And well, now we are still there for you for any questions you might have in the questions window. Thank you.